Imagine standing right at the edge of this huge, really silent forest. It's so thick the light barely even gets through the trees.
Yeah, dense.
And the wind, it's not just whispering, it's like this deep sigh through the pines. It can feel, comforting, but also kind of chilling at the same time.
Definitely. It sets a mood.
Now, picture a 14-year-old girl, Stefanie Damron. She knew these woods, apparently, knew them like the back of her hand.
Right. Very familiar territory for her.
And she steps into them after what sounds like just a normal family argument, a typical teenage thing.
Exactly. Seems ordinary at first.
She walked in carrying basically nothing, just the clothes she was wearing. And then she was gone, vanished.
Just like that.
And this isn't some folk tale or a movie plot. This is real. This is the baffling, heartbreaking reality of Stefanie Damron's disappearance.
It's a case that really sticks with you, doesn't it? Because it starts so normally.
Yeah.
A teenager wanting space after a fight, heading into a place she knew well, a place she probably felt safe.
Totally relatable.
But then, the story just takes this sharp turn into deep mystery. It leaves behind this void, a total lack of any physical trace, and just this unbearable weight of unanswered questions.
Absolutely. And look, that's really our mission for you, our listener, in this deep dive today. We want to try and cut through all the noise, the internet theories, the bits and pieces from news reports, all the scattered info.
Yeah, there's a lot out there.
We've gone through the articles, the official police and FBI reports we could access, even dove into some of those online community discussions, trying to pull out the most important, the most critical details about Stefanie's case.
The goal is really to give you a clear picture.
Exactly. We want you to walk away from this feeling like you really understand it, what happened, what the search involved, and what still remains just frustratingly unknown.
So the setting for all this is New Sweden, Maine. Tiny place.
Really small, yeah.
Population around 575 people, maybe. Deep in Aroostook County, surrounded by these incredibly dense forests.
This isn't your local park. This is proper wilderness.
Oh, absolutely. It's the kind of place where people generally have to know the woods, right? And that familiarity, in Stefanie's case, becomes this central, really confusing part of her disappearance.
Right, because she did know them. So Stefanie Damron was last definitively seen on Monday, September 23rd, 2024. It was around 3 p.m.
Okay.
She just had an argument with her older sister. This was at their home on West Road, which was described as off-grid.
Off-grid. Important detail.
And critically, she walked southeast from the house, carrying absolutely nothing. No phone, no backpack, no water, nothing. Just wearing blue jeans, a long-sleeve blue shirt, and these black Harley-Davidson hiking boots.
Those boots become relevant later, too.
They do.
And her background, and it's more than just a side note. It's a really key context here. She was homeschooled.
Right.
Which often means, maybe slightly more limited social circles, less exposure perhaps to certain things compared to kids in traditional schools.
Potentially less online footprint, too.
Possibly, yeah. And while she was described as shy, her confidence outdoors was apparently, undeniable. She was always out exploring, building forts in the family's own 40-acre woodlot right next to their property.
40 acres is a lot of space to know.
It is. So this isn't just about knowing the general area. It's about being comfortable, feeling like you belong in that specific environment.
Yeah.
Which leads to the big question. Why would someone so comfortable, so capable in that setting, just vanish without a single trace? That's the real puzzle here.
It really is. And here we are, June 19th, 2025, almost 9 months later, and Stefanie's case is still open, still active with the Maine State Police Major Crimes Unit and the FBI.
Still actively investigating.
And the sheer number of tips they've received is just staggering. They've come in from 13 different U.S. states, from Canada, even from Europe.
Wow. Worldwide attention, then.
Seems like it. Yet, despite all that, all the resources poured in, all the hope, there hasn't been a single physical trace of Stefanie found. Not one thing.
Nothing.
It's like you said, it's as if the forest just swallowed her whole, leaving behind this awful, agonizing silence.
It's deeply unsettling.
Let's really try and drill down on the exact timeline of Stefanie's last known movements. Because in a missing person case like this, especially one with just zero evidence, every single minute could be absolutely vital.
Timing is everything, yeah.
So as we mentioned, her background is important. Homeschooled, limited social media, harder maybe to track digitally. But outdoors, super confident, knew these specific woods intimately, built forts, explored.
Right, she wasn't a novice out there.
Not at all. Which is why it's so weird. It just flies in the face of the usual story of someone getting lost because they didn't know the area.
It really does. Normally, that level of comfort suggests she wouldn't easily get turned around or lost.
Yeah.
Under typical circumstances, which immediately makes you question the simple lost in the woods idea.
Exactly. So the lead up, her sister's account, it sounds so normal.
Hmm.
Around 2:50 p.m. after this argument, Stefanie's last words were apparently, "I need space."
I need space. How many teenagers have said that?
Right. It's universal. Just wanting a moment alone, a cool down after a fight.
The sheer ordinariness of that exchange compared to the mystery that follows. It's jarring. What happened in the minutes and hours after that everyday moment, that's where things get really strange.
And that brings us to this incredibly tight window, just 50 minutes, where there's some potential activity, potential sightings, around 3:15 p.m.
Okay, so about 25 minutes after she left.
Yeah. A neighbor reported seeing a small figure in blue on the Loonbrook snowmobile trail heading east.
And Stefanie was wearing blue jeans and a blue shirt.
Exactly. Perfect match. Now, here's where things get, well, interesting and maybe a bit frustrating from an investigative angle. This sighting, this potentially crucial piece of information, it wasn't publicly confirmed by law enforcement until February 2025.
February. That's almost 5 months later.
5 months. Think about the impact that delay might have had on the early search, on public awareness, on maybe jogging someone else's memory early on.
That's a significant lag. It means the initial search teams, the public appeals, they weren't working with that potentially vital detail. They didn't know to focus on that specific trail or direction initially.
Huge. And then, just 25 minutes after that potential sighting at 3:40 p.m., another weird kind of ambiguous thing happens.
Okay, what's this?
A Border Patrol sensor on Route 1 activates. Now, Route 1 isn't far from New Sweden, and New Sweden, as we keep saying, is really close to the Canadian border.
Right, less than 20 miles.
So the sensor picks up activity, and here's the frustrating part, it logged no matching vehicle license plate.
No plate. So it detected something moving, but couldn't identify it as a specific car.
Seems like it. This info came through a Department of Homeland Security briefing to the Maine State Police. So immediately you've got this question mark hanging over potential cross-border involvement, right? Abduction, maybe, given the location?
It definitely raises that possibility. It's a data point that screams, look closer, but it doesn't give you a clear answer. It just tells you something was happening near the border around that time, but not what or who. Very frustrating.
Totally. It could be completely unrelated, or it could be the absolute key. You just don't know. And then fast forward a little bit more to 4:10 p.m. Something else happens that, well, it later got a lot of attention, especially online.
What was that?
Stefanie's father, Christopher Damron, posted something on Facebook. It was in a local barter trade group offering firewood for sale or trade.
Okay. Seems pretty normal.
On the surface, yes. But journalists captured the timestamp, 4:10 p.m. It places him online doing this sort of mundane thing during this critical 50-minute window when his daughter had just walked off and might still have been nearby, or when that sensor went off.
So the implication people drew was that he wasn't out actively searching during that specific time.
Exactly. Now, it doesn't prove anything, of course, but it's a detail that added complexity and definitely fueled some questions online about the family's actions in those very first hours.
Which leads us directly into one of the most critical and probably most debated parts of this whole case. The delay in reporting her missing.
Yeah, the 16-hour delay.
She was reported missing mid-morning on Tuesday, September 24th. But she was last seen around 3 p.m. the day before. That's a long time.
It is.
The parents' explanation was that these brief cool-off walks weren't unusual for Stefanie. They said she'd done it before, just walked off for a bit to decompress. So they waited overnight, hoping she'd just come back like usual.
And you can kind of see that logic, maybe, if it was a pattern.
You can understand the thought process, perhaps, but the consequences of that delay were massive from an investigative standpoint.
And investigators were really clear about this, right? They were pretty critical.
They were. They specifically noted that the 16-hour delay critically erased the prime scent window for the canine units.
Explain why that's so crucial, the scent window.
Well, canine searches rely on scent particles that we all shed constantly. They hang in the air, settle on the ground. In good conditions like damp ground, cooler air, not too much wind, which they actually had that first night with the drizzle, those scent trails can last quite a while.
Okay.
But a 16-hour delay,
Yeah.
especially with rain, even a drizzle, by the time the canines got there Tuesday morning, those crucial fresh scent particles from Monday afternoon would have significantly weakened, dispersed, or just washed away.
So the dogs had nothing reliable to follow.
Essentially, yeah. It makes an already incredibly difficult job finding someone in dense woods exponentially harder. It's the difference between having a faint path to maybe follow versus just having nothing, a cold trail. That lost time was devastating for the initial canine search.
Wow. Okay, so let's talk about the environment itself. Northern Maine, it's beautiful, but it's tough terrain.
Incredibly unforgiving. And it absolutely played a huge role in complicating the search right from the start. Once she was reported missing on the 24th, the response was immediate and pretty massive, lasting through September 30th.
What did that involve?
Everything they had, basically. The Maine Warden Service, state police, they brought in canines, drones with thermal imaging, and ground teams doing meticulous grid searches, combing through specific sectors methodically.
Sounds thorough.
It was. But despite all that effort, all those resources, the result was the same across the board. No trag or dropped items located.
Just nothing.
Nothing. Think about that. A 14-year-old girl walks into the woods. It's damp. It's fall. Maybe she's upset. Maybe she stumbles. Maybe she gets turned around. And not one thing is found. No footprint in mud. No piece of clothing snagged on a branch. No dropped water bottle, even though she didn't have one. It's just bizarre.
Yeah, even people trying not to leave a trace usually leave something accidentally.
Exactly. Experienced SAR pros will tell you it's highly unusual to find absolutely zero physical evidence like that, especially when someone leaves on foot.
And the seriousness wasn't lost on the authorities, especially with the border nearby.
Not at all. The geography amplified everything. Because New Sweden is so close, less than 20 miles from the Canadian border, the FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Unit, the CARD team, was activated within 24 hours of her being reported.
That's fast.
Extremely fast. And it's not standard for every missing kid. It's a specific protocol triggered by that border proximity, the border abduction risk. FBI Boston handles that region.
So what did that mean, practically?
It meant immediate BLAWs, be on the lookouts, sent straight to Canadian Customs, the RCMP, Royal Canadian Mounted Police. The fear was obviously that she could have been taken across the border very quickly.
Makes sense.
But despite those urgent alerts going out to Canada, there was never any record of Stefanie's passport being used, or any official crossing under her name, which adds another layer of complexity to that abduction theory, at least if you assume an official crossing point was used.
Right. So the environment itself, more than just the trees, right? The weather, the ground conditions.
Absolutely. It wasn't just the density. It was everything working together against the searchers. September temps up there, you're looking at maybe 40 to 65 Fahrenheit, typically.
Okay.
But the first night Stefanie was missing, the low hit 42 degrees, and there was that steady, soaking drizzle.
42 and damp is cold, especially if you're just in jeans and a long-sleeve shirt.
Dangerously cold. Hypothermia risk goes way up. Even mild hypothermia messes with your thinking, your coordination. You get confused, disoriented, make bad decisions. It makes finding shelter or getting back on track much harder.
So survival chances decrease rapidly.
Significantly, yeah. And then there's the forest floor itself. Super dense undergrowth, thick spruce, fir, pine, tangled bushes, fallen logs, rocks everywhere.
Hard to move through, hard to see.
And hard for scent to travel. That thick vegetation can sort of absorb and scatter scent particles, especially after 24 hours, and especially if it's wet. It just deadens the trail. That's another big reason the canines likely struggled so much, even beyond the time delay.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then you add the leaf drop. September is peak season for leaves falling in northern Maine.
Ah, right, covering everything.
Exactly. By the second day of the search, the ground is covered in this fresh blanket of leaves. It's like nature's camouflage. It hides footprints instantly. It scatters scent particles even more. It can completely conceal small items someone might have dropped.
So even if she did leave a trace initially, it could have been buried within hours.
Very possibly. So you have the time delay, the drizzle, the cold, the dense undergrowth, and the falling leaves all working together. It creates this incredibly challenging scenario for any search team. It helps explain that really puzzling lack of any physical evidence.
But they didn't give up. There was another big search later, right?
There was. 7 months later, in May 2025, May 2nd to 4th specifically, a major follow-up effort. They really wanted to hit it again with different conditions.
What did that involve?
It was huge. 60 personnel, more advanced drones, probably with better thermal or different sensors. They brought in horses, which can cover different terrain, and fresh canine teams, hoping maybe a different dog or handler might pick up something missed. They researched 4,500 acres.
4,500 acres? That's a massive area, basically redoing the initial search zone.
Pretty much, yeah. Recombing that core area, hoping maybe the spring conditions, less leaf cover perhaps, or just fresh eyes, might turn something up.
And the result?
The same agonizing result. No new evidence found.
Wow. After all that, again.
Again, nothing. And that, coming after such a huge renewed effort 7 months later, just deepens the mystery even more. It really suggests that whatever happened to Stefanie, either she left truly zero trace, or the evidence is hidden somewhere incredibly well, somewhere conventional search methods just couldn't find.
It's profoundly baffling.
It really is.
This case is it's packed with these unusual circumstances, these lingering red flags that jumped out immediately to investigators, and certainly to the public and the online communities looking at it.
Yeah, they identified 5 key ones pretty early on. And when you stack them up, they paint a really, really confusing picture.
Okay, let's go through them. What was the first one?
The first, and maybe the most scientifically baffling, is that zero canine track after day 1. Like we talked about, damp fall conditions, usually pretty good for scent. Someone leaves on foot from a known spot. Dogs should, theoretically, get something.
Even a faint trail or a direction of travel?
Something, yeah. The complete lack of a consistent, followable track isn't just weird. It's a major anomaly in SAR operations. It strongly points towards possibilities like, well, immediate vehicle transport. Or maybe she was concealed immediately and deeply somewhere scent couldn't escape. Or some kind of instant scent elimination. Yeah. Well, highly unusual for a simple runaway scenario.
Right. It's like she just evaporated. Yeah. Which leads right into the second big red flag. Yes. No belongings found.
Exactly. 4,500 acres searched multiple times with dogs, drones, people on foot, and not one single personal item.
Nothing.
Nothing. Think about it. People under stress, people who have accidents, even experienced hikers, they drop things. A glove falls off. A hat gets knocked off by a branch, a hair tie snaps, maybe a wrapper from a snack, though she didn't have one, something.
Especially those boots. She was wearing black Harley-Davidson hiking boots. They sound pretty sturdy, distinctive maybe.
You'd think they might leave a mark, or if one came off, something. The complete absence of anything at all. It's incredibly puzzling. It really bothers search professionals.
I can imagine. Okay, third red flag.
The border zone proximity. We keep coming back to this, but it's crucial. New Sweden is less than a 30-minute drive from the New Brunswick border in Canada.
Not just a detail, it changes the whole game.
Completely. It immediately throws these very specific, very scary possibilities onto the table. Child exfiltration, human trafficking. It makes it fundamentally different from a missing person case deep inland. That proximity is precisely why the FBI card team got involved so incredibly fast. That's why Canadian police were alerted immediately.
Because time is critical if someone crosses that border.
Absolutely. It becomes a jurisdictional nightmare and recovery becomes infinitely harder. Speed is everything in those scenarios.
Okay. Number 4. This one got a lot of discussion.
Yeah, the family's 16-hour delay in calling 911. We discussed their explanation, the cool-off walks being normal for her.
Right.
But investigators were blunt. That delay wiped out the prime scent window. It wasn't just an inconvenience. It took away the best chance the canines had for a fresh track right at the beginning. It's a fact that just hangs there. Not necessarily assigning blame, but understanding its fundamental impact on the crucial first stage of the search.
It's a critical piece of the timeline, no matter the reason.
Yeah.
And the 5th red flag.
This one is more about perception, maybe, but it's significant. The father's online posture. Christopher Damron's Facebook profile picture, which apparently showed him aiming a pistol toward the camera.
Okay.
Combined with that status update just 6 days after Stefanie vanished, the one that read, "She just wouldn't listen."
Oof. That timing is...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. It fueled huge speculation online. Now, detectives reportedly told journalists they viewed the post as, quote, emotionally tone deaf, but not evidence of wrongdoing.
So, not legally significant, but the optics.
The optics were terrible. It just seemed so jarringly out of sync with the usual desperate pleas from parents of missing children. It fed right into the online sleuth communities. Reddit threads went wild. People immediately saw it as suspicious, regardless of the official take. It really shows how social media can create its own narrative in these cases.
Definitely. A real intersection of personal grief, public perception, and online scrutiny. Okay, so those are the 5 big ones. But there was something else revealed by the search logs, right? About areas that weren't searched initially?
Yes, this is a really critical operational detail, unsearched microzones. The Maine Warden Service used GPS breadcrumbs to track exactly where search teams went. Very standard, very thorough.
Okay.
But those tracks showed that 2 small, privately owned woodlots, about 23 acres total, so not huge, but still significant, were skipped during that first most vital grid sweep. Because the landowners were away on vacation, and their gates were locked. Searchers couldn't get access right away.
Ah, logistics.
Exactly. Now, they did go back. They got access and searched those parcels about 6 weeks later.
6 weeks?
Yeah. And by then, think about it, 6 weeks of rain, leaves falling, maybe even early snow starting to melt and change the ground. Whatever might have been there, a footprint, a small clue, any sign of passage would have been much, much harder, maybe impossible to find compared to finding it in the first day or two.
So another crucial time window potentially lost due to just bad timing and a locked gate.
It's a stark reminder of how even small logistical issues can have huge, irreversible consequences in these time-sensitive searches.
Yeah.
That initial 24, 48-hour period is just golden.
Okay, and then there's this other theory, the really unsettling one, the wild card theory.
Yeah, this one comes from some retired search and rescue captains, people who know Aroostook County's woods inside and out. And it's chilling. The woods up there are full of hidden history. Specifically, abandoned 19th century hand-dug wells from old farmsteads, and these things called beanhole cellars from old logging camps.
Beanhole cellars.
Yeah, basically underground storage pits, lined with rocks maybe. They dug them to store food, keep things cool, like rudimentary root cellars.
Okay, so old holes in the ground.
Exactly. But these aren't just obvious pits. They're often narrow, deep shafts. And after 100 years or more of neglect, they're completely overgrown. The openings are hidden under decades of leaf litter, fallen branches, brush. They can be virtually invisible until you step right on them.
Oh, wow.
And the terrifying part is, if someone fell into one of these, especially a narrow, deep one, it could leave absolutely no surface trace.
Yeah.
Imagine stepping on what looks like solid ground and it just gives way.
And nobody would see anything wrong on the surface.
Precisely. And furthermore, think about the scent aspect. The way air currents might work in a narrow, deep shaft like that. Scent wouldn't necessarily travel along the ground in a way canines could follow. It might vent straight up, dissipate, or just get trapped.
Which would perfectly explain the zero canine track.
It's a potential explanation, yeah.
Yeah.
It fits that piece of the puzzle eerily well. Now, they did try to address this. In that May 2025 search, they used thermal drones specifically looking for cavities.
Okay, good.
And this is a big bird, but the drones were apparently programmed to flag cavities wider than 18 inches.
18 inches. Some of those old wells or shafts could be narrower than that, couldn't they?
Absolutely, especially hand-dug ones from that era. So while they looked, they might have missed smaller, older shafts that could still easily conceal someone. It leaves this terrifying possibility wide open. A plausible explanation for a complete disappearance with no clues.
That is a truly disturbing thought, that she could be theoretically right there, but hidden by history and leaves. It makes you think about what else might be hidden out there, and if our search tech is even capable of finding everything in that kind of environment.
It certainly highlights the limitations.
Okay, let's shift perspective a bit and look at the investigation itself, the hits and misses. What went well, what maybe didn't?
Sure. On the success side, the hits, you absolutely have to point to the rapid FBI involvement.
Yeah, getting the card team on board within 24 hours.
That's huge. It shows immediate recognition of the potential severity, especially with the border involved. It brought national resources, expertise, and that crucial cross-border communication channel online instantly. Very commendable interagency cooperation right off the bat.
And the searches themselves, despite finding nothing, seem thorough.
The extensive sweeps were definitely a hit in terms of methodology, covering 4,500 acres with ground teams, air support canines, and logging it all with GPS breadcrumbs that shows a systematic, organized approach.
Those breadcrumbs are important, right? To know what's actually been covered.
Vital. It prevents redundant searching, ensures coverage, and provides a clear map for future efforts. It shows they weren't just wandering aimlessly, they were executing a plan. That documentation is key.
Okay. Well, what else?
The public outreach was pretty solid, too. Using those tip portals online, getting flyers out, and crucially, making those flyers multilingual, English and French.
Important for that border region.
Absolutely. Recognizing that many people in northern Maine and across the border in New Brunswick might be bilingual or primarily French-speaking was vital to maximizing the reach of their appeals for information. So, definite positives in the response.
Okay, but then there are the misses, areas where things perhaps fell short or could have been done differently.
Right. And arguably, one of the biggest potential misses, given how quickly things can change, was the delayed CCTV canvas.
Checking security cameras in the area.
Exactly. Many businesses and even homes have surveillance systems, but a lot of them automatically overwrite footage after a fairly short period, sometimes just 24 hours, maybe 72 if you're lucky.
So by the time investigators got around to asking for footage,
It might have been too late. Potentially crucial video from those first hours after Stefanie disappeared, showing cars on the road, maybe her walking past, any unusual activity could have been erased forever. That early window is critical for video evidence.
a huge lost opportunity, potentially.
What
else?
We circle back to this, but it bears repeating as a miss. Those unsearched private parcels during the initial sweep.
The 23 acres behind the locked gates.
Yeah. Waiting 6 weeks to search that specific ground because of access issues meant searching completely different terrain conditions. It created a gap, a blind spot, in those absolutely critical first days. You can't get that time back.
Frustrating. And the digital side.
That's the other big one,
Yeah.
the digital forensics lag. Waiting 6 whole weeks before examining the family's shared tablet and game console.
6 weeks. In a missing person case involving a teenager, that seems long.
It does raise questions, and it prompts a question for you, the listener. Why did they wait so long? In today's world, digital devices hold so much potential information. Search history, messages, social media activity, location data, maybe a 6-week delay. That's a lot of time for data to be potentially deleted, intentionally or not, or for crucial leads about her state of mind or contacts to just go cold.
It feels like another missed opportunity for timely information.
It certainly seems that way from the outside. And this leads to some forensic questions that are maybe still relevant, things that could potentially still be looked at.
Like what?
Well, those Harley-Davidson boots she was wearing. Heavy lace-up hiking boots. Have detailed casts or photos of this specific tread pattern been widely shared? Shared with SAR volunteers, maybe people checking ATV trails for mud tracks, looking in less obvious spots.
Could a unique boot print still be out there somewhere?
It's possible. A specific, unique pattern might be the one tiny clue needed to place her or someone else in a specific location. It's a detail worth pursuing.
Okay. And what about DNA?
The initial DNA collection was very limited, just a 200-foot radius around the house and the trailhead where she was last seen heading into the woods.
Seems small given the scale of the search area.
It is.
Yeah.
So the question now becomes, especially considering that wild card theory about abandoned wells or hidden spots, should they expand that? Should secondary sites, those old wells, maybe remote hunting stands or shelters, be targeted now with modern touch DNA kits?
Touch DNA can pick up really minute traces.
Directly sensitive.
Yeah.
Tiny skin cells left behind if there was any kind of struggle or even just contact with the surface near one of those hidden spots. And this raises another question for you listening. Should police broaden that DNA search radius now? Given the lack of leads and these specific theories, it's about adapting the strategy when the initial approach yields nothing.
Makes sense. Okay, let's try to structure the possibilities. Our theory matrix. What are the main lines of thinking here?
Broadly, there are 3 main theories investigators and the public have grappled with. The first, naturally, is runaway.
The arguments for that.
Her age, 14. The argument with her sister right before she left. Her saying, "I need space." These are all pretty classic signs that might point to a teenager deciding to leave, at least temporarily. And the fact she knew the woods and liked to roam could suggest she planned a short cool-off trip, but then ran into trouble, got hurt, lost, hypothermic.
Okay. But the arguments against her just running away.
They're pretty strong, honestly. The biggest is the absolute lack of any trace. No belongings found, no reliable canine track. That's very unusual for a runaway, especially one who left with nothing, no phone, no money, no backpack. She wasn't equipped to be gone long.
Most runaways try to contact someone eventually or leave some sign.
Often, yes. Or they're found having sought shelter or help. And again, that weather, 42 degrees and drizzle, surviving overnight, let alone longer, unprepared, highly unlikely without something else happening very quickly. So if she did run away, the lack of trace suggests an immediate secondary event.
Okay. Theory number 2.
The one the geography screams, abduction or trafficking.
Arguments for this.
The zero canine track is huge here. If she got into a vehicle almost immediately after leaving the house or the trail entrance, there'd be no ground scent for the dogs to follow. That fits. Her potentially sheltered background homeschooled, described as shy, could, sadly, make her a vulnerable target.
And the border.
And the border. Less than 20 miles to Canada. That makes swift exfiltration a terrifyingly real possibility. It's why the FBI protocol kicked in. And you have that weird Border Patrol sensor activation on Route 1 around 3:40 p.m., no plate logged, but activity detected near the border. It adds a layer of definite suspicion to this theory.
But what argues against abduction?
Several things. Crucially, no ransom demands ever came. That's often, though not always, a factor in abductions. There was no sign of forced entry at the home, suggesting she wasn't taken from there. And despite massive publicity and investigation, no solid leads pointing to a specific suspect or vehicle have emerged.
And the lack of passport use?
Right. If she was taken across the border immediately through an official checkpoint, you'd expect some record, which there wasn't. Of course, unofficial crossings are possible, but it complicates the picture. So the geography supports it strongly, but the follow-up evidence hasn't provided confirmation. It's agonizingly ambiguous.
Okay, and the third main theory?
Accident. This covers a range of possibilities, including that chilling wildcard theory.
Arguments for an accident.
Her confidence outdoors could, ironically, be a factor. Maybe she ventured into a more dangerous, less familiar part of the woods, overestimating her knowledge or underestimating a risk. The heavy leaf cover could easily hide hazards, slippery rocks, a hidden hole, a steep drop-off. And the temperature and drizzle could cause disorientation or a slip and fall.
And the wildcard theory fits perfectly here.
It does. Falling into one of those hidden 19th century wells or beanhole cellars. It explains the lack of surface trace, the canine failure, everything. It's a specific type of accident that accounts for the baffling lack of evidence.
What argues against the accident theory?
Primarily, the sheer scale and thoroughness of the searches. 4,500 acres combed multiple times, including with thermal drones looking for cavities, albeit with that 18-inch limitation. For an accident to leave absolutely zero trace over such a wide, intensely searched area is statistically unlikely, unless it's that very specific scenario of falling into a perfectly concealed, deep shaft. Any other type of accident, a fall, getting trapped, you'd expect something to be found eventually. A scrap of clothing, remains, something.
So unless it was that very specific type of accident, it feels less likely given the search effort.
Exactly. It really pushes that wildcard theory to the forefront if you lean towards accident.
It's also worth putting this into a slightly broader context, right? Missing persons in Maine specifically.
Yeah, this is a really striking statistic. Maine currently has 148 open missing person cases listed in NAMIS, the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System.
Okay, is that high?
It translates to about 11 missing persons per 100,000 residents. And here's the kicker. That rate is nearly triple the national average for rural states.
Triple? Wow. Why?
Well, advocates and some experts suggest it might stem partly from issues with how data is collected and managed statewide. Apparently, Maine relies on a somewhat patchwork system with voluntary reporting from local agencies into the state database.
So not fully centralized or mandatory?
Potentially leading to inconsistencies or gaps. This could impact how cases are tracked, how resources are shared or allocated, and maybe even how investigations are prioritized or conducted across different jurisdictions. It has another layer suggesting that while Stefanie's case feels unique in its specifics, it exists within a state system that seems to struggle with a disproportionately high number of missing persons already.
That's a really sobering thought. It means her case, while deeply mysterious, might also reflect some larger systemic challenges in a rural state with vast wilderness areas.
It's certainly a factor to consider in the background.
Beyond the search grids and theories, this disappearance obviously hit the community of New Sweden incredibly hard. Population around 575, everyone must know the family.
In a town that small? Absolutely. An event like this sends ripples through everything. It shatters the sense of safety and security. The community has been living with this uncertainty, this fear, these unanswered questions for months.
And that situation was probably made more complex by the father's social media stuff we mentioned.
Definitely. Christopher Damron's posts, the "she wouldn't listen" comment, the gun profile pic, they didn't just raise eyebrows. They fueled intense online speculation. You had Reddit threads dissecting every word, every image.
Even though police said it wasn't evidence of wrongdoing?
Right. Investigators might see it as emotionally tone-deaf, but for online sleuths, it became evidence of something sinister. It really highlights how public perception, especially fueled by social media, can create its own narrative, sometimes running parallel or even counter to the official investigation. It put the family, already going through unimaginable pain, under this intense, often harsh public spotlight.
A really difficult dynamic, but the community itself, they tried to stay supportive.
Oh, yeah. Despite the online noise and the awful uncertainty, there were community vigils, continued public appeals for any scrap of information. It shows that deep down, there's this powerful human need for answers, for closure, and a collective hope to bring Stefanie home.
And the authorities kept pushing too, right? There was a reward offered.
Yes, that's important. On December 2nd, 2024, the FBI officially announced a $15,000 reward, That's for information leading either to Stephanie's safe return or to an arrest and conviction if foul play was involved.
$15,000. That's significant.
It signals that federal authorities are still very much invested, that they believe answers are out there, and they're hoping this incentive might encourage someone who knows something, however small, to finally come forward. It shows the case is far from cold in their eyes.
As we start to wrap this up, we really want to encourage you, our listener, to think about the person behind all these facts and timelines, Stefanie Damron. Think about the human element. What part of this story stands out most to you? Why?
Yeah, which of those red flags really grabs your attention? What does it suggest to you?
And put yourself in the shoes of the searchers for a moment. Knowing all this, the terrain, the weather, the lack of clues, the different theories, how would you even begin to approach a search like this? What would you prioritize?
It's worth grappling with these questions because these cases linger. They challenge our basic assumptions about safety, about how someone can just vanish, especially from a place they knew.
They force us to think about the limits of our knowledge, the limits of our search methods.
Right.
And look, if anything we've talked about today sparks something for you, a memory, a piece of information, even if you think it's tiny or irrelevant, please reach out.
Don't hesitate. Let the investigators decide if it's relevant.
The official tip lines are still active. You can contact the Maine State Police or the FBI directly at 1-800-CALL-FBI.
And we want to make a specific appeal, too, based on the location.
Yes. If you are in or around the New Sweden area or anywhere in those vast woods of Aroostook County and you have hunter trail cameras,
Or even just wildlife cameras set up.
please check your footage. Go back to September 23rd, 2024 and the days immediately after. Look for anything unusual, a person, a vehicle, anything out of place.
Those cameras are silent witnesses. They run 24/7 in remote areas where people rarely go. They could hold a vital clue that no one even knows exists yet. That footage could be absolutely crucial.
Even the smallest detail might be the piece that finally connects the dots.
It really could. In a case this cold, with so few leads, that trail cam footage is a potential goldmine.
So we're left with this profound question, aren't we? After all the effort, the technology, the hundreds of searchers, the months of investigation, how can someone vanish so completely? What does it mean when the wilderness holds a secret this tightly?
It's deeply unsettling.
And what does a case like Stephanie's really teach us? About that thin line between a place feeling familiar and safe and the truly unknown dangers that might be hidden just beneath the surface, even in our own backyards.
Yeah, are there just limits to what we can know, what we can find in these vast, wild places?
And what's it going to take? What new technology, what different way of thinking might finally be needed to unlock a mystery as deep and as baffling as this list?
It makes you wonder what the future of search and investigation holds for cases like these. Will we ever have the tools to solve them all?
Questions we don't have answers to right now. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the disappearance of Stefanie Damron. Staying informed, thinking critically about these cases, it's an ongoing process, and we really appreciate you spending this time with us today.